Umówiliśmy się
We have arranged with Madam Minister that our panel will be dedicated to technologies in the service of security. All of us will agree that there can be no cybersecurity without the development of technology. That's why we've decided to talk today about the most modern solutions, the best practices from different perspectives. From a perspective of a global company, such as the Bain company. So hence the presence of the global chairman, Rafał Stępnowski, the president of the DA&A at Bain. Mr. Stępnowski is the head of the Global Operation Model Initiative. He's a member of Advisory Council on digital aviation market, and he's also the head of the Jeppesen company here in Gdańsk. Privately, I can say that he produces also jazz concerts. Then we have Dr. Dariusz Kołębiewski, the vice president of PZU Lab company. We collaborate in supporting Polish startups and high-tech companies. We've carried out a project together called Scale Up, in which we've managed to find young, talented companies which responded to challenges presented by large companies. One of those large companies was the PZU company. And that's how an anti-drone system was born for the clients of PZU company. And the objective of this system is to secure safety at companies which require special measures to protect their premises. Mr. Dariusz will speak from a perspective of a major Polish company about the issues of safety, and the good practices within the PZU company. We have also invited magnificent young men here from Pomerania region, who at a certain stage of his education has moved to Krakow. And it's a great pleasure to have Mr. Maciej Surowiec with me, the Microsoft Governmental Affairs Manager at the EU level. Mr. Surowiec studied international law, and he prepared international law aspects based on in the context of the conflict in the Balkans, where he analyzed conflicts with non-formal militias, and the results of his scientific work back then have now returned as today. He dedicates himself to the cyber security, to identification of threats. Before passing to Microsoft, he worked as a public and private affairs consultant in Brussels, and I believe he will be the best person to initiate our discussion. And we've established that Maciej will start by a brief presentation. A very important perspective is the perspective of a Polish company that operates with the end client, with the entrepreneurs who deal with the security of their companies on a daily basis. That's why we've invited Mr. Tomasz Ostaszewski, the president of Monolith IT, a person with long years of experience in IT security, and he will tell us about how Monolith IT helps to secure data and solutions of Polish companies. The Monolith IT company is known for elaborating the biometric signature, which is an electronic description of the signature with preservation of numerous physical characteristics and details. This is a very interesting solution, and Tomek is responsible for software development and R&D at his company. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we said today that there is no safety without the development of technologies. And on one hand, we have massive financial resources and substantial political support. We talked about Russia and other cases where technology develops rapidly and turbulently. So this is one of the issues which we'd like to address today. Are we capable of keeping up with the development of technology that's used for cyber threats? And before I ask my speakers to answer this question, I'd like to start, just like we talked with Maciek, by a short presentation. Can you hear me? Yes, hello. I'll switch to English as we have English speakers. Będę mówił po angielsku. Chciałbym omówić trochę innowacyjność i cyberbezpieczeństwo, w jaki sposób postrzega się to w różnych obszarach i zwłaszcza ciekawym zagadnieniem, o którym już wspomnieliśmy wcześniej, to ewolucja hakerów od tych nastolatków w garażach, którzy byli entuzjastami, do zaawansowanych grup przestępczych, które chciały przejąć pieniądze firm, aż po kraje, które wspierają działalność hakerską. Mówimy o krajach, które angażują znaczne środki w przygotowanie długotrwałych ataków wymierzonych w zasoby innych państw. Mamy tutaj za sobą pomieszczenie, w którym zbierane są dowody w działalności gospodarczej, działalności cyberprzestępczej w Europie. Dosyć blisko współpracujemy z organami ścigania w sprawie botnetów i innych zagrożeń cybernetycznych. Do tych zagrożeń podchodzi się w rozmaity sposób. Przykładem botnetu, który został zdjęty przez organy ścigania we współpracy z Microsoftem, to Citadel. Miliony komputerów zostały zainfekowane i wykorzystane do przestępstw finansowych. I w momencie, kiedy zaczęto wykorzystywać wizualizację big data, zorientowano się, że istnieje pewien wzorzec. Widzimy, że jak patrzymy na Stany Zjednoczone, rozkład ataków przypomina rozkład społeczeństw, mieszkańców w Stanach. W Europie również ten rozkład ataków wygląda na rozkład społeczny. Natomiast w Europie Wschodniej coś jest nie tak. Ostatni raz, kiedy patrzyłem na wschodnią Polskę, nie było tam pustyni, a patrząc po dystrybucji malware'u, okazuje się, że mamy tam pustynię. Więc okazało się, że po dochodzeniu, że jeżeli mamy, że to oprogramowanie wykrywało ustawienia językowe komputerów i jeżeli komputery miały ustawiony ukraiński lub angielski jako języki domyślne, wówczas to oprogramowanie nie działało. Po co? Po to, żeby nie szkodzić własnym służbom. Nie wiem, Paweł, zgadnij, ile incydentów dziennie odnotowujemy? 99? Nie. 7 miliardów. To 80 przypadków na sekundę. Oczywiście żaden człowiek nie może sobie z tym poradzić. Wykorzystujemy sztuczną inteligencję, by tworzyć priorytety. I dlaczego Microsoft jest tak atakowany? Odpowiedź jest prosta. Ponieważ jeżeli oferujemy usługi w chmurach rządom lub klientom, a ich wrogowie też chcą mieć dostęp do tych chmur i atakują naszą infrastrukturę. I wydaje mi się, że Microsoft jest dosyć dobrze przygotowany, by radzić sobie z tymi zagrożeniami ze względu na zmianę paradygmatu, czyli nie tyle radzenie sobie, unikanie zagrożeń, ale też działania aktywne w ich względem. Więc z jednej strony mamy zarządzanie tożsamością, a z drugiej strony wczesne wykrywanie infiltracji. Więc jeżeli mamy dobrze chronioną tożsamość zabezpieczoną silnym hasłem, to dla naszego rządu może być trudne stwierdzić, w którym momencie Jan Kowalski działa jako Jan Kowalski, a którym razem ktoś się pod niego podszywa. W związku z czym stosujemy technologie umożliwiające śledzenie zwykłych zachowań i następnie na podstawie tych zebranych danych ustalenia, kiedy następuje odchylenie od takich zachowań. Inną kwestią to radzenie sobie z danymi tajnymi, gdzie pojawia się kwestia szpiegostwa przemysłowego lub sponsorowanego przez inne rządy. Tutaj określenie, kiedy działania powinny być zgłaszane, a kiedy nie, jest kwestią ważniejszą niż kwestia dostępu bezpieczeństwa. Mamy też trzeci obszar, który stanowi największy obszar ataków, również ze strony państw, ponieważ jest to, że żyjemy w połączonym społeczeństwie, dzielimy się informacjami w ramach sieci społecznościowych i w ten sposób najłatwiej można atakować osoby cywilne, ale też cele wojskowe. Rozmawiałem z Marytje Szakę w zeszłą środę dotyczącą obronności cybernetycznej i byłem trochę prowokacyjny w swoim zachowaniu, ponieważ otworzyłem jej Twittera i zdałem sobie sprawę, że była w Microsoftie parę dni wcześniej i zretweetowała wiadomość od nas. I tu mamy ją, jak rozmawia z Peggy Hicks. I co jeżeli napisałbym jako Peggy Hicks z publicznej domeny, udając, że przesyłam jej dokument dotyczący wcześniejszej rozmowy. Phishing jest już nam znany, więc jeżeli ktoś nam oferuje $1 000 000 za kliknięcie na załącznik, to go nie klikamy, ale ze względu na liczbę wiadomości, które do nas docierają, trudno jest nam dostrzec takie dopasowane indywidualnie ataki. Więc nie każdy najedzie myszką nad link i zorientuje się, że przez pół sekundy zostanie przekierowany na stronę nielegalną, a następnie potem na właściwą stronę, żeby zapobiec w ogóle przed zdaniem sobie sprawy z takiego działania. Więc musimy uczyć się, jak działać w takich sytuacjach i musimy umieć zabezpieczyć osoby korzystające z usług w chmurach przed właśnie tego typu atakami. Kończąc, chciałbym powiedzieć, że idziemy krok dalej niż tylko technologia. Nawiązując do tego, co mówił Paweł, Microsoft zaproponował cyfrową konwencję genewską. Wydaje się, że wszędzie na świecie istnieje potrzeba odejścia od przejść do wiążących zobowiązań międzynarodowych, w których kraje zobowiążą się do nie mieszania się do procesów wyborczych, do ochrony prasy i mediów. I wydaje mi się, że Microsoft jasno zaznaczył swoje stanowisko i chcemy wprowadzić to nowatorskie podejście do obszaru prawa międzynarodowego. Dziękuję Państwu bardzo.
Dziękujemy bardzo za to wprowadzenie i ciąg dalszy będzie w języku polskim.
Dziękuję za to wprowadzenie Maćkowi.
To Maciej, from the perspective of Microsoft, i.e. a global blue chip, and which is in charge of our security and user security. I'd like to ask Rafał how it looks from the standpoint of a global plane manufacturer, and not only plane manufacturer, of course, and perhaps as a bit of a provocation, I'd like to ask you if a plane is a secure product from a cybersecurity standpoint, if it's not like Patrick Kai, who said of European Air Transport Agency, that a hacker can actually take over control of a plane. Is that correct? Of course, we do respect the opinion of the head of the European Agency of Air Security, but we don't actually agree, and it's a 0-1 answer. Someone could say that I'm irreverent, as the Titanic was unsinkable, of course, but they supplied no argument to support the statements, and so far reality has actually verified that statements. It's not just technically difficult, also bad luck could be a factor. Well, aerospace is such a thing that, or air travel is something that affects us all, as we have 5 billion passengers using airlines annually. So it's like a significant chunk of the global population taking to planes. So it is a mass phenomenon, and it's also highly actually saturated with technology. And we know that all planes have been designed and produced for the past years in the formula of internet protocol availability. So internet communication is available at all the stages of a flight. By 2027, it says that 70% of all aircraft, including the oldest units, will be fitted with internet communications devices. So speaking of vulnerability, or ambitions of some baddies, we can say that that industry is quite exposed to threats. Internet, by its own right, is not a secure place, and of course we can apply security means, but of course the life cycle or the design cycle of a plane is a 30-year-old one. A 30-year-long one, and hackers adapt to new abilities and technologies within days or hours. So this asymmetry of a crossbow and a shield is quite dramatic, of course. And of course, we also know that the plane doesn't actually travel in void, as it's a network of connections of a number of actors, also airports and security agencies, air traffic agencies, logistics at airports. All of that is heavily ICT'd, and it also affects the security of the industry. I wouldn't like to invoke specific cases, but coming back to your question, Pavel, if I consider any technical or engineering engineering industry, the one that the security is really the most prominent in DNA is the aerospace industry. Also speaking of supervision, certification, and also FAA or EASA, so the American supervisor as less as the international one. I think it's just pressured into the international market. Boeing and the other company, allow me to say, the bar has been raised so much with regard to certification from the point of view of cybersecurity of a plane. So that's an opening remark. So the plane does remain the safest mean of travel, also in this aspect. Speaking of insurance, risk, I think it's the most important thing in your industry, Darek, and also actually estimating risk and risk management with regard to ensuring a number of risks. I'd like to ask you how you, as a large underwriter and an insurance group, which is a state-owned company and the largest one in the state, how have you been coping with minimizing such threats or eliminating those on part of the customer? What do you apply to ensure the security of your client, of us, end users? Thank you very much for this question. I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation to be part of this event. I'd like to say that PZU is an entity, and I represent the department which is in charge of handling large risk factors linked to critical infrastructure. So the weakest links, let's say, we're speaking of the cybersecurity of a state. We started thinking about it more or less 3 years ago when we started developing some solutions. We invited the leaders of the Polish IT industry, and we established a work group which we dubbed Cyber Industry, and we invited the representatives of leading academic institutions and state institutions tasked with security. And we ran a series of workshops half a year ago when we asked Polish businesses how they've been addressing security with regard to cyberspace, but we didn't focus as much as IT that we've been talking a lot about today. From our point of view, critical infrastructure is the most vulnerable to operational, i.e. OT level, and this is what we focus on with regard to our solutions. It turns out that us as industry are definitely far from ready to face up to cyberspace threats. And since that time, a year and a half ago, a lot has changed, I think, and I think we have contributed partly to the current state of affairs as our analyses indicated the cybersecurity with regard to critical infrastructure shapes up much better, and there are dedicated units formed within companies that address that notion. We've been looking for Polish technology on the market. That's why we've been working hand in hand with a number of startups. And here I'd also like to nod to Pomeranian Special Economic Zone as us, as a professional and a big company with due to a number of items of inertia, it's very difficult for us to actually bridge the gap of our business model with a small enterprise. And this is where we work together with the Pomeranian Special Economic Area Zone. And we've been working on because cyber threats are considered by us from the point of view not only of threats, but we also see it as an opportunity for Poland as a state, because we have got fantastic specialists in the area, and working hand in hand with academics, we've been able to assess the potential of Poland with regard to IT engineers, automaticians, or mechatronics specialists, and we can say that they do represent the global level of competencies and expertise, and because they very often struggle to find employment on their level, they very often travel abroad and contribute to the development of those industries internationally, and this is one of the challenges we need to face up to. And because we've been trying to work with those small startup and spin-offs we've been supporting that have been developing under the auspices of tertiary educational institutions, we'd like to stem this brain drain of Poland, and I believe and I hope that we're going to support us in the process. As I've already said, we're also an entity, or the first point at point between an underwriter and a customer. We can very often create things with our industrial customers in Poland, and we would like those Polish solutions which are developed in the startups we work at, so that they are trial run and implemented in major Polish businesses. I think one of the key elements, speaking of startups and technology in Poland, are blue chip companies. If those don't open up to small and mid-sized enterprises, very soon we are going to find ourselves the province of new technologies industries, and our industry has been changing dramatically, but mostly utilizing global sourced solutions, and very few of those developed at home or homegrown developments. And we've seen some technologies arrive, but they wither then as they just run out of financing at some point, and no consistent value is built at those startups, so they need to cooperate and be supported by blue chips. I'd like to encourage the representatives of all the other blue chips, especially state-owned enterprises, so that they support such small and medium enterprises and that they open up to the solutions, as that's a real opportunity to seize. Well, yes, there are some Polish businesses which have been developing fantastically, but I think it's hard to deny Monolith IT a startup. But Tomek, I believe you're a well-established business, and you are really quite proximate to Polish businesses, and we very often deliver your own solutions. And you're also tasked with R&D and software development. From your perspective, what does it shape up like in Polish enterprises when you go to a new business and they need to open up their doors so that you can actually come up with a tailor-made solution to address their issues? The picture is not as rosy as painted, as Darek has said. It has been improving and consistently. I'd like to quote some statistics here, which are based on PwC reports. These statistics are for last year, and 44% of businesses suffered financial losses in the follow-up of attacks. 44% have lost some money because someone breached their security. 62% of entities suffered disruption and halts. So 62 and downtimes. So 80% or 30% between 3 to 5 hours, and the last ones are the ones 5% of those businesses were out of business for a few days. If you remember last year, we had ransomware WannaCry, which switched off one of the largest providers of car parts, spare parts for cars in the land. And of course, that translates into tangible profits lost. And 21% suffered ransomware attacks, which of course encrypts data and demands ransom for decrypting data. In the past, it used to be done for money. Now, it turns out, after an attack by Petya, it's not about money anymore. It's just about inflicting damage. So 20% of small and medium enterprises have got not a single person tasked with being in charge of cybersecurity, and this is really dramatic. And we, as a provider, can actually see it. 46% of entities have no procedures for responding to incidents. If they know something happens, well, they have no idea whatsoever what to do. And what I find interesting is how people think when an attack occurred. If a hacker attacks, it's not about lights going off. Everything goes on as always, and very often we don't even know we've fallen victim of an attack. There was a statistic available. What do you think the average time was for detecting an attack? But it's like in hundreds of days, more than 300 days it takes on average to realize that an attack has actually occurred and that some data has been seized. So that's really dramatic. And 33% of businesses indicated that the main source of incidents were the currently employed company workers, and that's really quite fascinating. I don't know if you remember, in the 1990s in the US there was a famous hacker by the name of Kevin Mitnick who was dubbed the biggest hacker of the time, and he wrote a book in which he said, "I broke people, not systems." And of course, the weakest link in IT is the human factor, right? And Paweł did say about how much we are in need of technology, which supports us in securing systems. But very often we just need to talk to our personnel. And phishing attacks, for instance, is a matter of making our staff aware with regard to what to do, what not to do. And even the best systems, or anti-spam systems, will never detect all the attacks. That is why, in my professional practice, when I come across customers, I very often happen to see that IT departments are quite underfunded. I've got some statistics which say that 3% of IT budgets are dedicated to or earmarked for security. That's the average. It's been calculated that it's just a third of the actual necessary amount. So it should be 9 or 10% of an IT department budget that should be dedicated to security. And with Polish businesses, it's been shaping out. There is a CCC, cena czyni cuda, or price makes wonders. And of course, we need to keep calculating of the pros and cons, how much one can lose, and what one can gain if they fall victim of an attack. And of course, depending on such risk assessments, of course, we need to launch and deploy the right security measures. So 61%, very often, 61% companies quoted budgetary constraints as reason for not deploying any cybersecurity measures, but also more than 50% quoted lack of personnel, and 32% quoted lack of awareness on part of the board of directors. So the decision makers had no awareness whatsoever that that's an area which needs investments, and very often it is that IT heads don't have a strong political position within the corporate structure, and they are too scared to actually go to the board members and demand financing for cybersecurity. So this is the image of a Polish entity. So from the IT point of view, it's underfunded. The staff are, well, I can't say they are not educated enough, as they are fantastic, brilliant people. But the main task for them is to ensure continuous work of IT hardware and software, but they are not trained particularly in the area of security to ensure business contingency, and we don't seem to be learning from mistakes. It used to be said that Apple learns lesson in hindsight, and we remember this ransomware, I Wanna Cry, from last year. And that ransomware used the vulnerability which had been known for 60 days, and there was a patch available for it. So for 60 days, and those were large businesses, those were large global businesses, they hadn't used that patch for 60 days to actually tighten up their defenses, actually. And at some point it was impossible not to notice WannaCry attacks. And I could see some huge displays at airports that instead of current information just indicated that those were infected. The same with ATM machines. And after a few months, Petya arrived, which used the same vulnerability. So we seem not to have learned. So it doesn't just refer to Poland. So there's no reason to be very hard on ourselves exclusively. But when it did hit headlines, and it still took, well, yet another experience and a reoccurrence of the same phenomenon. But Petya was more malicious. That if I Wanna Cry was just created for money, Petya had been developed just, or not Petya, was just aimed at damaging hardware. So that specific targets in Ukraine are just taken off, actually. So that's the sad reality. We've talked so much about nice things, but yeah, then reality catches up with us. Yes, reality that catches up with us doesn't really look that fantastically from that perspective, but of course there are a group who offer solutions to problems. Maciej, I'd like to ask you, speaking of your experience and Microsoft's experience, what the most interesting forms of cyber attacks, most innovative ones you've actually described or identified? And perhaps you could also tell us something about some interesting solutions that could support us in securing ourselves from such activity.
The most interesting cases, let me mention two, which Microsoft wasn't directly involved in, but appeared in the industry. So these were theoretical attempts to penetrate the systems in laboratory conditions. In one of those experiments, the lab workers used DNA samples and then embedded malware into DNA, and which then infected a computer unprepared for malware intrusion via DNA. And then if we have another case is the air-capped networks, the isolated networks. This is used for secret and top secret networks. They are considered super safe, but the researchers showed that malware can be sent to devices via vibrations, and then using a radio frequency which is unheard for human ear. So this is a theoretical scenario, but I believe concentrating on those is unreasonable while the cybernetic hygiene is not dealt with. Three recommendations I can say. Firstly, an updated software and the most recent version of software prepares for attack vectors which are already known. Secondly, protecting one's identity using strong passwords, not using the same password for all the web pages. If we use the password for a poorly protected site, then we can be sure that this will be exploited on other sites. So also using two-step verification via phone or text message. And third best practice, what Tomasz said and what I've also mentioned, is to be reasonable in what we click. If we click something bad, we should remember that it's a shared responsibility in regards to cybersecurity within the organizations. It's good that you mentioned recommendations, and I believe that now we'll maybe ask you to share a few recommendations which can be interesting and useful in our daily lives related to cybersecurity. Also, speaking of the most interesting and maybe most serious cyber attacks, Rafał, I wanted to ask you, how does your industry, the aviation industry, deal with them? How does the information flow look like? Those attacks can happen to company X today and company Y tomorrow, so the flow of information is fundamental. So I'd like to learn how it works, and if you could share an example of a most serious hacker attack or cyber attack in the industry, if you could share that with us. This will be a troublesome issue because the most serious breach took place in Poland. The group 1937 first hacked Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh airports. It was not ransomware, it was hacking. So there was no threat to passengers' lives, but disturbance occurred. But a flight planning system hacking, so hacking the plan which the pilot receives before flying the aircraft, took place in Warsaw at the airport in 2016. Now it's a case that's part of literature, and these incidents have fueled an interesting dynamics. As first we had the industry-driven actions, and Airbus also joined, and this resulted in launching the ISAC initiatives. Why did this center was created? Why was this center created? It's just not about aviation, it's about different milieus that companies rarely share information, because both for reputation and prestige and for other issues, if a company deals well with breaches, they rarely share their experience with others. In 2012, Boeing proposed this solution, which took to the air after more serious breaches which occurred several years later. And with all due respect to EC, the European Centre for Aviation is more of an analytic body than something that would operate between companies. What is the mantra is that aviation is a team sport, and such solutions allow to mitigate the risks. However, what lies ahead of us is what opens us to serious threats. Until 2020, all the aircrafts will be equipped with a device which will substitute radars it will be more of satellite technologies used for controlling the flight. This will be a field for various threats. Are we capable of dealing with them? Do we draw conclusions only from errors, or can we learn before? That's an important issue. What's more, all the technologies related with Internet of Things, such as if Alexa hears a TV commercial or on TV that someone wants to buy something, it can actually order the purchase of this thing. Then there is the issue of communication between pilots and air traffic controllers, automatic solutions, digital voice. This will be interesting. So to conclude, cybersecurity is a journey. And what's most important in any field, not just aviation, is that we need to have a roadmap for collaboration of industry. You always said it's the two sides of the equation. It's the user and the supplier, but it's also the supervisory bodies, official authorities, which need to collaborate to eliminate this immense and growing threat to all of us, not just the industry. Yes, it's we're chasing a rabbit. We try to prevent, we try to find new solutions within our organizations. We search for them, but the enemy is strong and has significant resources. Rafał, you've mentioned Internet of Things. Today, everything can be insured. Is that true? And if so, I'd like to ask you, in a provocative manner, as we talked with Maciek before, there is a question. Can a refrigerator become a cyber weapon, a cyber terrorist using access online? Can one insure from such risk? And Maciek, I'd like to ask you from the technological side, is that feasible at all? Is it in the context of direct threat to an average user? Well, we speak a lot about the IT layer. I focus on the operational layer and control systems. So thank you for this question. Yes, of course it's possible. And there has been an event in Germany. In one of the steel mills, the cooling system was reversed, was switched to heating. Fortunately, no one got injured, but that was a major case. We've also seen attacks on critical infrastructure in Poland, which are not very broadly discussed, but we as insuring companies get information about those cases later on. We as insuring company, what we can offer is the compensation of losses. So it's the preventive actions which we're employing and trying to prevent any loss from occurring. But should such a loss happen, then we have the entire insuring calculations and the machinery working on it. So we have special security advanced products for petrol and oil industry, for aviations and other major critical companies, and which include covering downtimes and also loss of assets. We can speak of a loss of revenues, but if we talk about the steering or control systems, then the consequences can be severe both for the workers and for the society. We model various scenarios for major companies in Poland using mathematical tools which allow us to model the consequences, and these consequences can reverberate greatly. Speaking of cyber attacks, there is one element that changes the mindset regarding a cyber attack. We can have a domino effect or snowball effect with simultaneous attack on several institutions with consequences difficult to estimate. So for us, it's also difficult to assess the possible outcome. It's a completely new threat and there are few ensuring companies that are capable of dealing with such situations. We've mentioned human being as the weakest link. We've included such a tool in the security or in the industry, and it turns out that 70 to 90% of events that happen in the industry are caused by routine actions. So overriding procedures, ignoring failure indications. That's what generates most problems.
And secure cyberspace, this is where we have got a number of trainings related to cybersecurity to raise awareness and to also prepare those persons, as the response time is fundamental here, or those who are responsible for IT security. They need to respond to threats immediately, as each and every second counts there. And this is what we develop as an underwriter. So addressing a question whether we can have such a scenario that a fridge is a tool of warfare. But yeah, as a fridge, all the utilitarian aspects aside, could also be capable of, for instance, setting fire to property, and as it could overheat. So the Internet of Things is going to progress and advance, and we can see it getting in our lives ever more and into industry, and a number of IT solutions are now available on the cloud. And there are many risks related to it, or inherent to it, and we can't escape that. The question is how we manage the risk, and this is where we still need to carry on working. And Maciej, before I give up the floor to you, I'd like to extend the question of this fridge, proverbial one, of course, but on a more serious note. Technological advances is also computational power advances, where we are on the verge of quantum computing, which is going to give us incredible breakthrough with regard to the computational time for processing huge amounts of data. But of course, the dark side will be able to deploy that power to nefarious ends. So, do you think, from your point of view, are we going to be secure in the era of quantum computing, and what your recommendations with regard to that are? Allow me to start with the first question, as it's an easy one. I definitely agree with Darek that a fridge could be a tool of welfare and warfare. And allow me just to add another scenario. Medicines are stored in fridges, which at some temperatures can turn toxic if they are not stored correctly. So such scenarios can actually happen. But the problem we see is an issue with tools which are controlled not by microprocessors. I'm going to be a bit technical, I hope I'm not going to lose you to dozing off, but they're used with microcontrols, and they have less computing power. So there could be, we could see that the display which steers air conditioning here has got a microprocessor, but all the other sensors that control, for instance, opening windows, etc., they are based on microcontrols, and the firmware is not updated, and they don't report information on any mistakes to the infrastructure which manages it. So Microsoft Research published a year or 2 years ago a document whereby we listed a number of features such devices should have to develop infrastructure securely on the level of such devices. And a few weeks or months ago, we also launched a solution which allows to secure microcontroller steered or controlled such devices, and it's been in hand with ENISA with regard to health protection. Also speaking of the legal framework in the pipeline for market registration of products, I'm very much interested in such framework being developed, and I'd like that framework to be abided by businesses. Quantum computing, to an extent, we're also the part which is part of the problem, as Microsoft is very much involved in the developing of the quantum computer, and we've also got some R&D centers, also in Delft, in Belgium, also in Copenhagen, and I think it's a matter of time, and it's a matter of years rather than decades. And at the same time, we started thinking, well, okay, what happens if that computing power available for quantum computers, they'll be available on the cloud, but they need to be cooled down. If all the combinations with brute force could be actually breached within seconds, and now the computational power would need the time longer than the existence of the universe. So now, speaking of organizations that are part of standards and technology, and we were part of working groups which develops the mathematical problems which could be utilized for algorithms which are secure from quantum computing power. Why are we working on it now when quantum computing arrives in 10 years' time? Because government agencies, when they share information which is now confidential, or they have got some sort of confidentiality clause, in 10 years' time, those are still going to be data which will be very dangerous if leaked. That's why we would like such algorithms to be accepted by the entire technological industry before quantum computers arrive. That's why we're parts of that process. So briefly, I believe that the academia and industry have been thinking about this. I hope we're going to be secure in the era of quantum computing. Well, allow me to think and believe that this is really going to be the thing, and especially because people who know the topic have said that. Well, we're coming to the end of our panel. I would like to end the panel with a brief list of recommendations. Tomek, if I could ask you, well, you've already expressed some recommendations from Maciej, but I'd also like to ask you, well, you have spoken about it, speaking of the layer which is neglected, i.e. the behavioral layer, education, awareness. If you could tell us a few things about it. Yes. Speaking of the human being the weakest link, and this is what we've observed on our daily practice. And what we've been doing is education, the simplest of steps, so very simple procedures to communicate to users what they can and what they can't do, what they mustn't do. And a typical trick for breaching security is dropping a number of memory sticks in the car park, and I believe there is definitely going to be one worker who actually runs it on a computer, company computer, and then the hacker is inside. So this is the type of training that we do run and offer. Also, the European Commission has been developed like a number of directives, like NIST, which key services providers need to abide by. But, for instance, the report also testifies that 33% of all the companies of such operators have had solutions of SOC, Security Operating Center, which isn't the minimum is CM, whereby 20% of companies have got those, whereas SOC has been deployed by 30% of businesses. So we've been developed importing things, i.e. directives which are to support us, but we've not been implementing that at home, let's say. And again, the human is the weakest link. We've developed an interesting thing, and we've been forcing the key businesses to comply, but now we need to actually implement all that. So education, education, education. And briefly enough, could ask you for a few sentences of comments. I think what I've said, so my recommendations before. So something a note to finish on, speaking of the weakest link and the human, speaking of cybersecurity, something we need to talk about with our children. I'm childless so far, but speaking of cybersecurity days, I was in one of schools in Brussels, and I was talking to kids how to stay secure on the internet, i.e. since you don't lend your toothbrush to your best friend, why you tell them what your banking account password is. So this type of conversations allow us to shape up correct behaviors in children. So it's never too early to talk about cybersecurity, and allow me then to follow the footpath of the human. We used to have the motto of investment in education pays off the quickest. So education, yes, also on the basis, on the level of board of directors, and this is the money and where decisions are. And our efforts have been focused on those directions, as if there's no awareness there at the top, it will never trickle down the corporate pecking order. So I would focus on company boards so that they are more willing to educate themselves. And unfortunately, my colleagues have said that we're all much wiser in hindsight, and we've been approached by clients what to do after a breach. Those are our best customers, and they are quite aware. But it's important for us to prevent and to raise awareness before things happen, and to share knowledge. We do develop security for a number of industries. We've been doing that for IT, wooden pulp industry, paper and pulp industry, energy industry. So awareness again, and of course top management and boards of directors, education on all levels. So starting with nursery schools and boards. So I'm going to leave the human factor apart in culture, but of course it is fundamental. We need to think at design stage, not only of a service or a website, but also at software design stage or company strategy, how to make all these parts of the DNA, which will render us able to at least minimize or eliminate cyber threats. And in the worst case scenario, they will develop procedures or processes which allow us to control damage if such an event takes place. And that recommendation to actually consider the areas which I, for instance, represent, i.e. plain design, but also a number of other areas, we could see some adequate case of that. So this cybersecurity DNA needs to be part of it from the earliest stages of development, so at the drawing board stage. So this is my contribution. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So just to recap briefly, if we want to be secure on the net, let's start with ourselves. Let's educate our children, but also our organizations. let's act responsibly and use responsibly the good which the internet has got to offer, and let's look after our security on all the level of our organizations. I'd like to thank our panelists and to our audience for your attention. Thank you very much.